in our neighborhood, and like we're known as the Canadians. And that's how people remember us. They forget our names, but oh yeah, you guys are the Canadians.
Welcome to the Voices of OUTCAN podcast. Join Military Family Services US as we explore the experiences our Canadian Armed Forces families have while on OUTCAN. Leaving your home to live in another country can be an exciting adventure, but it is also a time filled with unexpected challenges. Get a glimpse into the CAF OUTCAN world with these unique stories of resiliency and courage. Share in their struggles and cheer for their triumphs. Here are the voices of our OUTCAN families. This is Joanna, your host for today's Voices of OUTCAN podcast. Today, I am so pleased to introduce you to a woman who is no stranger to the OUTCAN life. Stephanie Murphy has been married to her husband, Dave, for 22 years. And during those 22 years, they have spent almost 15 years out of Canada. They are on their second U.S. OUTCAN and had an OUTCAN in Germany as well. They have two sons, Broden and Grant, who have also been on this journey with them, which I actually think is a great place to start this conversation. Steph, Canadians have a lot of love and pride for their country. What has it been like for you to raise your boys primarily outside of Canada? Was it hard while living in other countries to instill in them that sense of what it means to be a Canadian?
That's a great question. And actually, on our first OUTCAN, that's where both of our boys were born. So they actually are dual citizens, which has worked out to be an advantage. They were both too young when we left our first OUTCAN, which was McChord Air Force Base in Tacoma, Washington. Our youngest at the time was not even one. They don't remember that. But when we moved to Germany, I would say that they were at the prime of their sort of like elementary years. So touring around and experiencing the culture and all the different sites, they were able to remember it and take it in. And they were at the age too where they like to still spend time with us, not like teenagers. Yeah, it was great. And then moving down here to Oklahoma City, our oldest was entering grade 10 and our youngest was entering grade 7. That was a bit of a challenge, I would say, just because we were not prepared for another OUTCAN posting at that period of time. We thought the kids were going to finish school in Canada in French immersion school, and we were maybe going to toy with the opportunity once they had left the house of going, out of the country again. But anyway, it didn't work out that way.
Plans change always, right?
Yes, that's right. But yeah, we were very fortunate. They both went into the same school here. Our oldest one graduated from here 2 years ago and is now back in Canada at military college. And our youngest one is now graduating here this year. This has also been our longest posting in our whole life. We are on year 6, thanks to COVID. And this is where I would say that they feel is their home, really. I don't know if that really has anything to do with the fact that they were born in the States, but it has made it much easier for them in regards to, being able to work part-time and things like that, because they have their American passports and social security numbers and things like that. So
I think that's a lot of people don't understand that when you do have a baby outside of Canada, at least in the United States, they do get automatic citizenship for being birthed there. And the sort of an interesting point too that some people may not realize is that if they maintain their dual citizenship when they turn 18, they have to register for the United States draft. So has your eldest son done that?
It's funny because we were prepared to do that, and they found him before he had a chance to actually register. Yes. So they sent a nice package to him, to our house. And funny is that, there is a place to check that you have joined a military of another country. So we were able to check that off. And I don't know how they actually maintain the fact that he is still doing that, but I believe it's up to the age of 25. I could be I could be wrong with that. But our youngest one is going to have to do the same thing next year. So we'll see
Just
how
one
that
of
goes.
those unique things that people don't really know about when families get sent out of their home country to another country.
Yes,
So
that's
would you
right.
say that your kids identify more as citizens of the world than Canadian, or do you feel like they've still somehow found that way to embrace we're Canadian?
I think that my husband and I have always tried to, maintain the fact that we're Canadians and instill that into our children. And it is interesting in the fact that, like, when we were in Germany for 4 years, the Canadian community over there is very tight knit, almost out of necessity because of the language barriers and things like that. The international school that the children went to had Canadians, Americans, and British, and a few other different nationalities that were brought in to work at the NATO base. However, I really think that that is where they probably got the most of their Canadian pride and heritage was actually in Germany. From there, we moved back to Canada, which they went right back into hockey. all the real Canadian stereotypical things. And then moving down here, it took about a year, and they really, what we saw, and maybe it was due to, the age and being teenagers, they really did change. Going back to Canada, they really enjoy it. They really identified and really started putting their roots down here.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's interesting.
A little bittersweet, maybe.
It is. And so, but then on the flip side, like now listening to our oldest son when he comes down to visit and talking to him on the phone, he has told us, yeah, I'm identifying as a Canadian. Like, I'm happy to be here. All the experiences of being OUTCAN has made him way more knowledgeable, but has been also used as a comparison to Canada. And he's like, this really is the best place to be. So, I mean, that's good to hear.
It's becoming home for him
Yeah.
again. Oh,
Yeah.
that's wonderful. So did you and your family ever feel sense of obligation as a Canadian military family living abroad to act as unofficial ambassadors to your neighbors or coworkers? And if you did feel that, did you ever feel that that was a lot to be asked of you or your boys?
That's an interesting question, actually. I would say that on our first OUTCAN, it was a much smaller Canadian unit. So the Canadians, again, were quite tight knit. Everyone knew each other and spent time together. However, we really integrated into our neighborhood and met a lot of our neighbors and, my husband's, I guess, coworkers that were American. Just, being such a small Canadian unit, we were the Canadians. Like, we were the Canadians in our neighborhood. We were the Canadians, with my husband's coworkers. And we really did have all the stereotypical Canadian, like, oh, you guys are so nice, you're so polite, all of that kind of stuff. But then I think moving here, again, I think in our neighborhood, and like, we're known as the Canadians, and that's how people remember us. They forget our names, but oh yeah, you guys are the Canadians.
Do you feel sometimes that you have to represent yourself a certain way to maintain that that beautiful image that Americans have of Canadians?
Well, it is funny because, and I do find, the difference between Washington State and Oklahoma. Washington State, is right on the border. So a lot more people experience Canada or have the opportunity to just jump in the car and travel there. However, Oklahoma, a lot of people have never been to Canada. And so they really don't understand the country, or let alone, the fact that we have provinces and where they are and the weather and things like that. You're asked a lot of the same questions. And if you were in Canada, you would just be like rolling your eyes talking about, do you live in an igloo and things like that? It's not quite that extreme, but
jokes.
Yeah, they just really do not have the education or knowledge on our country in general. So
no point of reference to even start from.
But a lot of people want to go visit there. I don't know whether they're just being polite and saying that. I do think that we hear that a lot, that, oh, Sunday I'm going to get there.
Don't forget to check out calfconnection.ca to find information and resources for members and their families specific to your location. Whether that's across Canada or at any OUTCAN post, Military Family Services is here for you, regardless of your posted location. Stephanie, I would love to hear a little bit more about your husband and the career that has taken you all over the world. But maybe, if you could, give us a little story about how you met to start, because I really love to hear your origin story.
Sure. Okay. So, my husband, Dave Murphy, he's been in the military now, I'm going to say 27 years. So, that's aging both of us. I graduated from high school in New Brunswick and decided to go to the University of Victoria in Victoria, BC. I had an aunt and uncle that lived there that invited me to come and live with them. And I decided, why not? I'm going to take this, opportunity and go check it out. Dave had graduated from his high school in Comox, BC, and applied to Royal Roads Military College in Victoria. Through a friend of a friend, we ended up being introduced and met in Victoria. So yeah, I don't know why someone thought that we had some things in common, but
well, obviously they were a good matchmaker, because here you are 22 years later, 7 years later.
Yeah, we've been married for 22 years. Yeah, it's just one of those funny things that UVic and Royal Roads were two very different, universities. So, he's trotting around town with his friends with all of their military leather jackets on. And, they're not allowed to wear jeans. And I'm wearing my Birkenstocks and my wool socks and, my jeans, and we're meeting at coffee shops. And anyways, it's funny how it all worked out. And actually, we met the year that it was the final year of Royal Roads. He knew that they were closing the college and that he was going to be moving to Kingston to RMC for the following September. We really were just casually dating, not thinking that this was going to lead to anything and we were going to be miles apart, but here we are.
I hear a lot from military spouses that they grew up saying, I'll never marry someone in the military. Was that ever you, or had you even ever considered that life?
I had absolutely zero military experience. I grew up in New Brunswick. I started school and graduated all in the same town, never moved at all. And there was no military there. In New Brunswick, there's a big army base, obviously in Gagetown. So we were about an hour away from that. That was our own, my only knowledge and experience. Yeah, I had never even heard of Royal Roads Military College. No. So, meeting him was interesting to learn all of I had no idea, and all of this kind of, it was all new. But like I said, we really did not have any intentions of, once he moved, of it carrying on our relationship. And then when it did, I think, I was never I'm not going to be a military spouse. I really didn't even know. And then even when I think I prepared myself, I had no idea.
I don't think any of us do, and which we're going to start talking about here in a second. But before we get into that, I do want to share a little bit more background about Stephanie. As she said, she grew up in a little town called Chipman in New Brunswick, about an hour outside of Fredericton. And after she attended that 2 years at University of Victoria, she ended up going to Ottawa and Carleton University, where she graduated with a Bachelor of Psychology with a concentration in criminology. And I happen to know she is a crime show and crime podcast junkie. Stephanie, if you could recommend one crime podcast, what would it be?
Oh, that's so hard. I'm going to say I really like Crime Junkie. And one of the reasons why is that they have a new episode every Monday. So every Monday morning when I go for my walk, I know it's there and it's a new story. And they also do a lot of focus on Canadian crime as well.
Oh, there you go. So you get a little bit of home when you listen to it too. All right. So everybody, you can check out Crime Junkie as well. So Steph also worked in social services for most of her career before she started with Military Family Services in 2010 in Europe. And full disclosure, she has been my coworker at MFSUS since 2015. Now, somewhere in the middle of all of that, she started her own furniture refinishing business, and before that, had her own custom order craft business while being a stay-at-home mom. I think Stephanie, like many of our spouses, knows a little bit about trying to navigate her life, both personal and professional, while being a part of a military family. Steph, out of all those things I just listed that you've done over the years, pick the one thing that gave you the most joy.
This is probably going to sound a little bit like, fake or rehearsed, but it's definitely working with military family services. I think, going into psychology and working with social services, I always knew that I wanted to work with people. I just thought when I was in university, I was going to be working with criminals. I just think that it became a passion as I gained experience and knowledge in being a military spouse and, moved and traveled and experienced different postings and having children and moving with them, starting different schools, seeing how they are affected. And I realized almost out of fluke, really, just meeting people, welcoming them into the community, how sort of exhilarating and filled up my cup, just, sharing, guiding, just helping other military spouses and families, actually. And then when I had the opportunity to work with military family services, yeah, it was a perfect fit for me, I think, for sure. If I wasn't working with military family services, I'm sure I'd be doing it anyway.
So if someone's
says,
listening, is someone's listening right now though, and they need some furniture refinished, are you still taking some side gigs?
I really enjoyed that. I definitely always need to have some kind of creative outlet in my life. Yeah. So yeah, I would certainly be doing that as well.
I think to the point that she's making though, and that I think that a lot of non-military families might not be aware of, is that many military spouses or significant others can really feel like they've lost themselves in some way when they quote unquote marry into the military, as we like to say. I don't think any of us thinks that's what we're doing. We meet someone, we fall in love, and they just happen to be in the military. And we don't always fully understand what that means for us. But it quickly becomes evident that it is really challenging to not have our family's lives revolve entirely around the member's career. So when I asked you how your husband's career has impacted you personally and professionally, you said, this is a loaded question. And I guess it is. But you also said that time has changed how you answer that question today. Tell us about that.
Oh, I would say I definitely really struggled at the beginning, more so with this feeling that I had this loss of my career. Even I think, my husband, he's AEC. I kind of, got off track there telling about how we met. But so he is an air traffic controller and air weapons controller. He was doing his training after military college in Cornwall. And I was doing my honors thesis work at a prison in Kingston. And I was working under a psychologist there, was offered a job to work part-time there and thought, this is perfect. And I'm going to go and get my master's right away. This is going to be like my career. So when my husband was done his training at the end of 9 months, he had requested a posting to Trenton. And then we had talked about, well, we'll live in between. And then, I will go to Kingston and he'll go to Trenton. And he got posted to North Bay. And I said, well, that's just not going to work. So you just tell them that we need to go to Trenton and get it switched and everything like that. And of course, he's looking at me like, tell who? Like, get what switched?
Tell the entire Canadian military to change my posting.
Yes, it was a huge eye-opening experience for me. And then in North Bay, I ended up working at a psychiatric hospital. It just wasn't for me. And so I was struggling with that and, taking that sort of blame out on him and, in the military and, this wasn't what I wanted. And then of course I decided, actually at the time I had looked at okay, this is going to be a whole new life. So how am I going to actually be a criminal psychologist and married to a military member? How am I going to keep this job and or career and move around? And I said, it's not possible. So after a long, hard thinking, in with Dave, and we had a discussion, I decided I'm going to go back to school and become a teacher. So I had my application all ready to go to Teachers College in Ontario the day that he came home with our posting to Tacoma, Washington. So he was super excited and, this amazing, out of country posting. And I was like, for goodness sakes, can nothing ever just go the way that I have it planned? So anyway, I did not send in my application and away we moved.
Basically, you make a plan and the military laughs.
Yes, it's so true. So I would say, in our, I guess it would have been our second posting, which was Tacoma, Washington. I did the same thing. This is what I'm going to do with my job. And I started working at a rehab center and again, knew it wasn't the right thing for me. Thought I'm going to go back to school. I'm actually going to get my master's and I'm going to put myself first. And then I became pregnant. And it's funny, like it wasn't planned, but it wasn't really planned. And the opportunity to be a stay-at-home mom, being OUTCAN, was a wonderful experience. And I wouldn't change that at all. So my career plans were definitely on hold. And that was, my choice. Then I would say it wasn't until the kids were, my youngest had started kindergarten or maybe preschool that I decided that I'm ready to go back to work. However, by that time, I had a different mindset, knowing that I don't want to say it's selfish and I don't want to say that, it's my husband's fault, but I'm like, I have to get on board to either move around knowing that I will be uprooted and switching jobs and or maybe not having a career, but what is it that I want to do that I'm going to be feeling fulfillment and giving something back and still support, my husband and family. Because I knew that if my career plans were to work out the way that I thought that they were going to in university, that we wouldn't be moving together.
Right.
And,
And
you do
some
see
people make that choice,
that.
right?
Absolutely. I was going to say that, you see, families that are on IR much more now because it's a very hard choice and it's not for everybody.
So let me just say right there. So IR is short for imposed restriction, and that's where the military member goes on to a posting without their family.
That's
For
correct.
whatever reason, whether that's because of their spouse's career or it's because maybe they don't want to take their kids out of the schools that they're in. But that's a really tough choice too, because
Absolutely.
it's a separation, and that's a tough one. And you didn't
Absolutely.
make that choice. That you took another tough choice, which was to set some of your things aside
I did.
for a
And
time.
yes, yes. And you know what? You really have to make that decision personally yourself and look deep down. And if you don't, if you're not comfortable, I think the possibility of holding a grudge or just putting that crack into your marriage, is always going to be there. You're always going to have the like what ifs, or if it wasn't for your career, if it wasn't for the military. Ultimately, I think I made that decision. I have been very lucky for the opportunities that have come my way, but I must say that I've also searched for things. When I wasn't officially, working, I have always found volunteer opportunities that have filled me with pride and purpose. Being a stay-at-home mom for me was personal choice and something that I honestly will treasure forever. I didn't feel like I was missing out. And what's right for one person might not be right for another person. Everybody is different that way.
You have to figure it out together for your
You,
family.
yeah, you certainly do. That's for sure.
Which actually brings us to some things I had asked Stephanie if she sort of had any personal mantras that she tries to live by, which I think goes into what she was just explaining, that there had to come a point where she made some decisions, where she had to make the choice. I'm going to find a way to make this life work for me. And so a couple of the mantras that she shared with me were: fight for the things that you care about, but do it in a way that will lead others to join you. And that is a quote from the recently passed Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She shared her thoughts that friends become our chosen family. You are responsible for your own happiness. Home is where your family is. And I like this one. We must travel to learn where we belong. Steph, if you were to pick one of those that has really given you the boost you needed when navigating life through these many OutCan postings now, which would it be?
Oh, it's so tough, but I will say that I think the one that, sticks out to me in being a military family is friends become our chosen family. One thing that we have just recently learned, and this is, our third OutCan, is what the border means. So with COVID happening, we were supposed to turn to Canada this summer, having our son in Canada at university. You really quickly realize what it means to live in another country. It's just not as simple, like, I'm just going to go there. When we were in Germany, it was the same way. Like, I mean, it's easy enough to hop on a plane and travel, and we're fortunate enough to be able to do that. However, it's not the same as hopping in your car and being able to, go and spend Thanksgiving with your family, or Christmas, or not all your family and friends has the means or the opportunity to get to come and visit you wherever you may be living as well. We have really found that at each and every posting we have been to, we have made lifelong friends that have truly become family. And sometimes moving to a place where you have no idea how long you're going to stay, you might not have that opportunity to, take the time that's needed to get to know each other and have that friendship form naturally on its own course. So sometimes they're really sped up. But when that happens, it is amazing the depth and relationship that forms with friendships. Yeah, we have absolutely been truly blessed.
Yeah, I think that's so true of any military community, not just Canadian military, but any military community in the world, is the connections that we're always having to form every time we move. But what great opportunities. And we get to meet some incredible people during those journeys. So that's a
Absolutely.
excellent mantra to live by. Stephanie just sort of touched on something right now. We are living in a very challenging time for everyone in the world. And many of our OutCan families are really feeling homesick, but they're not able to get home to Canada. And their families aren't able to come visit in the States, or are choosing not to because they don't want to come to the States or any other OutCan location, which could be in Europe or globally. But for your family, this issue of not being able to be with family during trying times is not a new one. And you shared with me what you described as the biggest challenge your family has faced over the years while OutCan, being the separation in trying times. So talk with us a little bit about what that's been like for your family.
I think it was my first experience actually being away from my family and friends when I, left New Brunswick and moved to BC, which was extreme for me. And it was really sort of a spur of the moment decision. It wasn't like I had planned on going to actual university in New Brunswick, and then, just decided I changed my mind and had that, oh, I'd like to, have a gap year and travel the world, but that wasn't going to happen. So I thought, why not just go to Victoria? you know, Being away from family and friends, especially when it's your first time, there's no way that you can prepare for it fully until you're actually in it. So yeah, I was homesick. I had no idea like exactly what that was going to be like. And as a teenager, you think, oh yeah, I can't wait to move away from my parents. But yeah,
Till it
that was
actually happens and you're sitting
yeah,
alone in your bedroom.
absolutely. Exactly. I had a little bit of, I started to gain experience that way. But then when Dave and I got married and met some friends in Ontario and North Bay, and then we moved to Washington, again, we were so far away from, all of my friends and family in New Brunswick. They were able to travel, but Germany was the big one, the far one. And just a little background information, we had moved from Comox, which most of my husband's family is from there or in the vicinity of there. So we started to experience a lot of family get-togethers. And with family comes, an extra level of, support and comfort that, again, you can get from really good friends, but it's just different. We were there for 5 years when my husband came home and said, we're posted to Germany, or have an opportunity to move to Germany. And I said, oh, that's nice. No, thank you. And he was pretty floored. His eyes were quite big. And he's like, no, I think, we're going to move. And it was also a trying time in the fact that I was ready to have the conversation of, like, maybe it's time to get out of the military. So that was, this whole discussion came up then as well, like in, my career and the lifestyle that we wanted to have for our children, and my husband's career as well. But he did convince me that this experience was a once in a lifetime, and we agreed, and away we went.
So not only was he not going to be leaving the military, but he was going to take you halfway across the world.
That's right. Having had that discussion, about moving there and all of these, like, what ifs, and, should he get out? It wasn't going to work out now. Should I focus on my career? That wasn't going to work out now. We're, taking our kids out of French immersion. So, we're doing education upheaval, and away we went. And then we settled in there. And I would say that living in Europe in general is an amazing experience. However, I would say at around the 6-month mark, you're not on vacation anymore, and you start to experience some major frustrations and challenges. And I would imagine
it's worn off a little bit.
Yes, exactly. Going to the grocery store and not being able to read what you're buying, and able to talk to people and into your neighbors, and can't mow your grass on Sundays. And, just a lot of things become very challenging and frustrating. We went through that, and then found out that my sister became very, very ill back in Canada. Of course, my husband at the time was in training, and then he started to deploy. So he's coming and going. Yeah, I had to go back to Canada. I will say that the experience in general, being in Germany, I'm not going to say I'm like an overly private person, because, anyone who knows me knows, I like to talk a lot. I share a lot. And, that's one of the reasons why, I work with military family services. Having something like this happen, a lot of people like to keep this stuff to themselves. They're just, dealing with it on their own. But we had no choice but to tell our friends, and my husband had to tell his work. And the support system that we experienced and found out about, services and supports through the military that we really had no idea, was absolutely amazing. I ended up taking a flight, I think it would have been in February, to visit my sister, and did not return back to Germany until May. Yeah. And my husband ended up coming with the kids, I think in April. And so we had been apart for about 2.5 months, which I had never experienced anything like that ever. Then we ended up actually getting stuck in New Brunswick, because if you remember the volcano that erupted in Iceland and shut down everything. So yeah, we had a lot of challenges, a lot of stress, but yeah, we rallied through. But I will say that communicating and sharing, that information with others there's no way we could have got through it without, the help and support of those that were around us.
Which is really, I think, as you said earlier, it's what's made you passionate to work with military families.
Absolutely.
So yeah. Stephanie has been with Military Family Services US specifically for 5 years now. Currently, she's the program developer. And Steph, tell us a little bit more about just why that passion for military families drives you each day. Like, what gets you out of bed to do this job and help these families? Besides, the obvious, it's rewarding, it is, but what else is there to that for you?
I think for me, I'm the type of person that I always love to learn, and I love to hear about other people's, experience and knowledge. However, if someone has actually experienced the exact same thing that I am going through, I can relate so much quicker and better, because I know that they have lived it.
Like an instant connection you get to make with people.
Yes. It's not, information that you've studied or read in a book or that you've heard about and things like that. I just, having met some incredible military spouses, in my career, and especially when I was a brand new, naive military spouse, it really affected me. They were guiding lights almost to, you can be successful and supportive. You can have your independence. You can do great things. You can have a, wonderful, beautiful family. Your kids are going to be okay. You can travel and see wonderful things and experience wonderful opportunities as well. To me, I just think, having been a military spouse now for 22 years, I have experience. So talking to different spouses about, whether it's being a new military spouse, challenges with their careers, putting their kids in different schools, experiencing deployments, moving, family members ill, and whatever it might be. I'm not going to say that I have all of this knowledge and experience, but I have some, and I'm empathetic to people, that are going through it. And even it's just to have someone to listen and go, yes, I understand. It truly is that they understand because they've lived it. They know exactly what it's like. And even within Canada, you don't even need to, go OUTCAN. And as you know, if you're not Francophone and you move to Quebec, it's, the challenges are just extreme. To have that happen on the civilian world, people can move, yes. They can have their spouse go away for training and exercises, but are they in danger?
Yeah.
That's a question,
it's like
you
that
just
extra
don't.
layer,
Yes.
that extra layer of concern that comes on every time.
Yeah. So I don't know. When you get a thank you from a spouse, or, you have a conversation, whether it's over coffee or, sometimes even it might be over a text, and someone's like, comes back later and says that really helped, or thank you for listening, or I took this piece of advice. Yeah, it's I don't know,
Satisfies
it's
your
what I live
soul.
for. Yeah.
Satisfies the soul.
Yes, that's right.
It's just been wonderful hearing about your journey and the journey of your family. Do you have any final thoughts that you would like to share about your military life experience that sort of exemplifies what you have found to love about your OUTCAN experiences?
I will say that each posting that we've had OUTCAN, I have fed off of my husband, and he has always come home with a big smile and bright eyes, and he's always super excited. And I'm like, well, and again, I think my mindset is sometimes going, here we go again. We have to move in the boxes and, yada, yada, yada. But OUTCAN certainly is an experience that enriches the lives of Canadians. Again, it can have its challenges, and it does have its challenges. Moving to the States, having lived in Canada, you think, oh, it's exactly the same. It's the same language. Yeah, they have a president, we have a prime minister, but the medical system is completely different. Banking is different. Schools are different. The weather is different. There's so much things that are different. And it's an opportunity to learn about other cultures, learn about other people, see different landscapes, and also just to have that personal development that you get a chance to grow as well. Having said that, though, it is so important that people take the time to do the research before they move anywhere, but especially OUTCAN, because it isn't for everyone. And sometimes I find that hearing, oh, I just talked to so-and-so and they said OUTCAN's great because of whatever.
Might be true for that family.
That's right. It's just so important to do your own research and find out the good and the bad so that you have realistic expectations before you arrive, and that don't go through the shock and awe that then maybe you realize that, oh my goodness, this really is not what is best for us at all. And that's very true, I think in Europe, but some of the differences, in the US are very extreme. And political atmosphere right now is not for everyone. We don't experience this kind of level of politics in Canada the majority of the time, I would say.
And it can be quite overwhelming.
It can be very overwhelming. That's right. Just the sizes of cities, therefore schools, lifestyle differences, guns is a big issue. I think as long as you're prepared with that information, knowing it, you're not going to know exactly what it's like until you actually experience it. But having that information, just thinking like of, all the natural disasters that we've experienced, just moving like, oh, I'm going to live in Hawaii. That sounds excellent. It's going to be like 3 or 4 year vacation. Well, you might live through one hurricane and decide that this was absolutely the wrong decision for my family.
Or you realize that you can't just get off the island.
That's
You're
right.
out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean and you're there for 4 years.
That's right. But a lot of times I will say that, especially for the military members, the opportunity for them for their career is also very exciting, whether they're Air Force, Navy, or Army. Just the experiences that they get to have is really great. And if you are a proud military spouse and you like to see your husband, have the opportunities, or wife, if vice versa, but it's great. It's an absolute, wonderful experience and opportunity.
Absolutely. Stephanie, thank you so much for sharing your OUTCAN experience with us. We appreciate the work you do with military families, and I love hearing a little bit more about who you are and about your family. So today we're going to leave you with one of Stephanie's life mantras. And as you encounter challenges, frustrations, and things that are outside of your control, remember, you are responsible for your own happiness. So today, choose happiness wherever in the world you may be. Thank you for listening to the Voices of OUTCAN podcast. If you enjoyed the episode, please subscribe to hear when new episodes are released and share with other military families and their supporters. Check out our Voices of OUTCAN podcast information and all of the other resources and supports offered by MFSUS on our CAF Connection web pages at cafconnection.ca/United States. To all of our Canadian military members and your families, we thank you for your service.